All right. What's going on, John?
Well, today we had the pleasure of finding out that the transmission jack that we were planning on using to lift out the transmission from this Ford Explorer with its transfer case just wasn't going to be big enough and didn't have enough reach to climb up to reach the actual transmission. Because the truck had to be high enough off the ground to get the transmission out from underneath it, we needed a pretty long reach to get to the transmission, and the regular floor jack wasn't quite long enough to do that. So I did a little research and we've made a conversion here on our regular normal shop kind of floor jack. It's a normal, I guess, 2-ton floor jack and a bed frame that's been somewhat modified. As you can see, I've essentially duplicated the floor jack's parallelogram system to create a new platform that will reach up to the transmission. And I have changed out the normal platform that sits there in favor of just a regular 1/2-inch bolt. It's 8 inches long. That's resting on the joint there, because that allows me to both reach up better and less chance of it falling off that platform. Plus it allows me to lower it substantially more too. Gives me about an extra 2 inches, believe it or not. So you can see how high this can actually reach. Okay, and you've also probably noticed that I've got this great big long frame with an extra pair of wheels up there. And that's because the Ford Explorer, the combination of the transmission and transfer case was quite heavy, and it extended so far beyond the normal point of balance of the jack that it would cause it to tip over. So I needed those basically as stabilizers, wheelie bars if you like. Okay, and once there is weight under this, you may have noticed that the center wheels have come up off the ground. But once the weight's on it, they actually do touch down. So it's quite stable. Steering wheel's front and back, so it pivots pretty good. Okay. To join up underneath the transmission, I decided the best way to lift it is by the edge of the pan rail. So these four bolts rest up against the pan rail. Careful not to damage the pan rail. And they're adjustable, so you can fine tune it for the height and angle to get the transmission exactly lined up when it's time to go back in, especially. That's quite important. Okay, so just a little bit of fine tuning to get it all right. We've also found these are just the pieces from the legs from the bed rail. And they tend to be a little bit flimsy, and under the weight of that transmission they kind of pushed out. So I found that simply adding a load strap around the outside of those four legs would allow it to stay nice and snug up against the pan. So we just put them on there, snug them up nice and tight against the pan, and Bob's your uncle. Okay, so it's quite effective. Had absolutely no trouble whatsoever holding the weight of that transmission and transfer case combination, and quite maneuverable. If you have to lay in your driveway underneath the Ford Explorer, such as this beautiful machine we have here beside us now,
Big pile of crap.
that sure beats trying to do it with a regular floor jack. Okay, so if you want to pause it for a second, we'll show the transmission here. So we've mounted the transmission up onto the jack so you can see it yourself. If you want to fling the camera over here, you can see this. For those who are perceptive enough amongst us, this is not a Ford Explorer transmission. This is a GM 700 R4 transmission. It's sitting on the pan edges there with a little strap around the bottom to keep the legs nice and snug. It's adjusted accordingly to the height of the car it's going into. So you may notice too, I've got that blue strap over top. It's an extra safety. Just if your driveway's anything like mine, it's a little bumpy. You don't want that thing rocking back and forth and falling off while it's in the process of going in and out. Okay. You notice too, I've hooked the straps into these slots here. The bed rails were actually for it could be used for a double or a queen size or a king size, so it has various slots to extend the rails. So I use those same slots to allow me to move these legs forwards or aft as necessary. Just undoing those bolts, just slide it up here, bring the leg further forwards or further back, whatever is most appropriate to the transmission you're working on. Whole thing cost me about $8 worth of bolts, and well, a little bit of welding time, but I'm sure if you don't have a welder at home, you can bolt that together, maybe drive your price up to $20 worth of bolts. But dead cheap. Thanks for watching, and hope this was very helpful to you. It's sure made a world of difference in my job trying to get this Explorer back together. Have a good day. So I thought I would break this back down to a normal floor jack again, and in doing so I would stop and show you the different components that I made to put this whole thing together and some of the things that I learned while putting it together. So you can see I have it partially dismantled right now. If you look over here. Okay, we have the two parallelogram parts and the I guess the part that goes underneath the pan, the two little legs sticking up, and the bolts and the big long bolt that I explained about earlier. One thing that to know that we found was rather important with this is that you carefully measure, particularly where you drill the holes, because remember this is a parallelogram, and in order to lift straight, everything has to be exactly parallel, which means the pivot points have to be very exact. Can you see both holes from that angle?
Yep.
Okay. So be careful when you're measuring out. Measure twice, drill once, so you know the old saying, right? And make sure that you have it right so that when you're putting it together that it'll lift nice and straight and not on a funky angle. I also found that the bolts that I used to adjust the pan height, you know, those 4 adjustable ones, I went a little too short. If you notice over here again, that those are I think 2-inch bolts. I think next time I would have stepped up to 4-inch bolts to give you more range to get your adjustment just the way you like it. I also had to, on one spot, add a little tab to move my pivot point slightly, and that allowed the jack to come down an extra 2 inches. It was quite significant actually, where I had originally put the bolts didn't work quite as well. So that was a little modification I made after my initial try, and certainly made a huge difference. So I hope that was helpful to you. You can see that our jack is almost back to normal. I got 2 more bolts to take off to take the pedestal off, and then it's back to our normal floor jack. So thanks again for watching. I hope that was helpful to you, and we'll see you next time.